great little topwater fly today. This is the Kent's Stealth Bomber. This is considered a slider topwater, meaning that because of the shape of the head, it's not a broad face, so it doesn't pop the water. Actually, when you strip this and wiggle this or whatnot in the water, it will tend to dive down underneath the water. So this is a slider, and it is my go-to slider for next to the Dahlberg diver for any bass and panfish, mostly large and smallmouth bass. It is just such a wonderful fly. The loop of foam back here allows air to get trapped in there and dragged under the surface, which causes more noise, more disturbance, more flash. It's just a wonderful fly. Simple to make out of 2 millimeter closed cell foam, some bucktail. But it is a great topwater fly, and if you fish anything, even I imagine in a little bit smaller sizes, you could pop some of these or swing some of these for trout. That is the Kent Stealth Bomber. I'll go ahead and get started. So before I actually start the Stealth Bomber here, I want to talk about it. There was an article years ago in a fly fishing magazine called American Angler. It used to be a free publication that came out. We get a whole bunch of them in the shop. And I think it has gone the way of the dodo. But had a great article in there by Kent Edmonds. Actually, it was talking about fishing, I think, down in Georgia. This fly was brought up. He had a wonderful page of instructions. I had actually saved that article and scanned that out. You probably can't see it here. Anyway, I had saved that article and everything, and then started tying this in a bunch of tying classes. Nice thing is, in that article, he actually had a template here. This supposedly is the template that you can cut out, put on the foam to cut the foam out. Well, I took that, modified it a little bit, and made my own instructions for my tying class of doing the Kent Stealth Bomber. This is for a size 4 hook. His, I think, was for a size 6, but you just make it bigger or smaller accordingly. It's no big deal. The nice thing is that in prepping for this video, I did some research, and I found one, Kent Edmonds has a really nice website, and he goes into detail about not only tying but fishing the Kent Stealth Bomber. And he has a link on his website to the original article that was in American Angler. So I will leave a link in the description down below to Kent Edmonds' site. Also another link on it's called ontheflysouth.com, has a really nice article on the Kent Stealth Bomber with some instructions and also links over to Kent Edmonds' site. So I just wanted to mention that there will be those resources and everything in the description down below to help you out. It's kind of nice when you have the template because there's no guesswork. It's really, really easy to cut the foam out in the right shape and the right size. And the size is important when we tie the fly. I'll show you. All I do with the template that I have like this is I just lay this on top of the foam, and then I just trace around it. So I just lay this on the foam like this, and then I just put some dots right around it. I don't have to have straight lines or anything. Where I'm really concerned about is the curve right inside both of these spots, because the length of that head, okay, makes a difference in where those curves are. So all of this it can be crooked or whatever, but this we try to make it follow the template. If, however, you are like me and did not get a very good grade in first grade in arts and crafts, and the cutting of these is a little bit too tedious, there is a company called River Road Creations. They made cutters for the Kent Stealth Bomber. They have them in two different sizes, for a mini stealth bomber as well as the regular stealth bomber. There are links down in the description for that as well to River Road Creations, where you could buy those cutters. The cutters are just what they say. They're basically a piece of sharpened steel that's in the right shape, and that's all set in a little block of wood, and then you can just stamp it right down on top of the foam, and you get a perfect body, what you're looking for. So keep that in mind. Those resources are there. Now I'm going to get started. This is a Mustad 3366 in a size 4. I fish these often for smallmouth and largemouth in a size 4 or a size 2. If I'm going to go for panfish, I'm going to be fishing these probably in about a size 8, maybe a size 10. Not much smaller than that. If I really want to go big for something bigger, I could do a 2-aught, 3-aught, that's so on. The Gamakatsu B10S is also another popular hook for this. You're looking for a straight eye hook, not real long shank. You could make it a little bit longer shank, but a nice wide gapped hook. So after I debarb the hook, I'm going to attach my thread. I'm using a UTC 140 Denier in fluorescent chartreuse. And I'm just going to attach this about the middle of the hook shank and wind this down. We're going to start everything right back here with the tail. The tail is made up of 3 different ingredients. This particular one is a chartreuse bucktail and a white bucktail, and then some Kystal Flash or flash accent. So a lot of times people will call this a Kystal Flash. There's actually a brand out there named Kystal Flash. This is actually Wapsi's flash accent. So first I'm going to cut some chartreuse bucktail out. You want to make certain that you're getting bucktail that's not too thick down at the base here, because it will tend to flare when you go to tie that in. But I can show you a trick also if you do have that. That's all you've got. I can show you a trick how to get around that. So I'm going to clip out about twice what I need, because when I grab the tip ends here, I'm mostly interested in the real long fibers. When I grab these tip ends, see how much of this short stuff that comes out. That will end up giving me just around about the right amount of chartreuse bucktail that I want. Plus, these are longer fibers. They're less likely to flare when I tie these in. You don't want the tail to be super thick. Keep that in mind. The first time tires of this, as well as clouds or minnows, will often make them too thick, too much bucktail. But I'm going to tie this in. I'm going to measure a hook length, which is from the front of the eye to the back of the bend. I'm going to measure basically 2 hook lengths, and then I'm going to tie this in. I'm going to wrap this in, actually going forward just a little bit to bind that in. And notice when I pull, see how it's flaring? This doesn't matter, it gets cut off. But if I pull down here, it's going to flare like that too. So if I pulled in real tight right in here, it's going to flare that out. Well, I leave myself just a little bit of room back here so that I can then advance 2 or 3 wraps, and this is with no tension at all. This is just collecting it down and keeping it from flaring. It just collects it together, that's all. I'm going to cut all the excess off at a bit of an angle. I want to make certain we're not getting into any of the forward space there. My Kystal Flash, I'm going to tie this in. I want to bring these ends about the length of the tail here. I'm going to wrap backwards a few wraps and then fold this over. Doesn't matter. You can actually have these more on the sides if you really, really want to. I just put them right in the middle between the chartreuse and the white, and they seem to do just fine. White bucktail, Here's another tip I had mentioned before. You don't want to, for this fly, use the hair that's down here at the base, because the diameter of the hair here is much greater and it tends to compress and flare. But if you use the hair that's up near the tip, or at least about halfway up this tail forward, the base of it is a lot thinner and it doesn't compress as much. Like the other one, you want to get out about twice as much what you need. We're going to take the short stuff out. And I don't have to measure this, because all I'm going to do is put this right up on top, the same length as the Chartreuse. Again, I'm moving forward, really binding that in, pulling down on that and binding that in, and then wrapping backwards to the end of the body. And these are more collecting wraps. They're not really that tight. They're just to collect that bucktail down so it doesn't flare. Trim these off. And I'm going to advance my thread forward, binding all of this down to the hook shank. Any extras that you have that are too long, go ahead and cut. This is all going to get covered up anyway. Nice thing about this fly, a lot of your warm water flies, you don't have to worry about them being tied just perfect. Either in terms of casting and or fishing, they can be kind of messy. And sometimes messy is even better. Okay. So that is the tail portion. Now, the body portion of this, I'm going to tie this foam in, but this is important. I had mentioned before about how the length of the head right here, this space of the foam, is important. Where these two corners are, they have to be sitting right behind the eye of the hook. So when I go to tie this in, I want to make certain that I have those two corners right there setting just right exactly behind the eye of the hook. So I set that up. You'll see why in just a minute. It takes tying this a few times to kind of get your head around what it is you're doing with it. My thread at the back end here, I am now going to wrap that body on. Now, you probably noticed that I pinched this together a little bit while I started to wrap, and I wasn't tugging on that thread real hard. You can cut through this closed-cell foam. So you're going to put a few wraps on, and then as you get 3 or 4 or 5 wraps on there, you're going to increase your pressure to start bringing that down and securing it to the actual hook. Otherwise, if you just wrap once and pull down, you can cut through it. But this places this right where I need it, right behind the eye of the hook. So that's our body, but we don't have it all tied in right yet. I'm going to move my thread in front of the foam, and this is optional. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to take some pearl chenille, sparkle chenille. You can use Estaz if you want. You can actually dub this with some ice dub if you want, or just leave it. Don't put anything on it. But I'm going to put a little bit of this pearl chenille right on the hook shank here. By the way, this is also one of those flies where, if you want, it's a good idea to, throughout the making of the fly, go ahead and put some head cement on there, let that soak in. That's just going to help make the fly a little more durable. Want to go ahead and wrap that chenille in. I'm not really going to worry about making certain it's all really tight and I'm not getting any fibers wrapped down. All I'm really doing is covering up the hook shank and that thread with this pearl chenille. It does give it a little bit more flash, I suppose. Obviously the fish is looking up, so. And you want to tie that off and make certain that you're at least an eye length behind the eye of the hook. Again, don't crowd that eye too much. You want to make certain that's tied down there. And then bring your thread right up behind the eye of the hook, because now fold this over, and I'm going to tie that foam and anchor it down behind the eye of the hook. Notice once again that I am pinching that foam to try and help it, just assisting a little bit, getting some wraps in, successively tightening up on that a little bit. If it turns on you, don't worry, you can scooch it back. Get that in, and that's secured. Now, I'm going to take my thread, my body is about this long right here. I'm going to go about a third of the way down. You could go half if you want, but I'm going to go about a third of the way down that body. I'm going to reach with my thread right over and then come across the other side with a wrap right there. Because this is where we take this part right here and fold it over. This is what makes the Kent Stealth Bomber reel unique. Because when you fold this over and you tie the end of that in back here, it creates this loop. And when you're fishing this and stripping it in the water, air gets trapped in here. And as it dives under the water, the air bubbles come out. Just adds a little more commotion, a little more noise, a little more attraction. But that's kind of one of the unique features of the Kent Stealth Bomber. A little more head cement. I'm going to put some Flashabou on here right now, and I'm using just a pearl Flashabou. The Flashabou that I'm going to put on, you don't have to do this. This is optional. The original recipe calls for it, but the Flashabou that we're putting on is for you. It's not for the fish. It's for you. In low light conditions, if you're fishing this and you're having a hard time seeing it, a lot of times this Flashabou you'll see it flashing around out on the water, and it just helps you to track your fly a little easier. So I'm going to wrap that in, fold it back, and now I'm going to wrap the head of this over. When I do that, you'll notice the head stops right behind the eye of the hook, and then I'm going to wrap right here, and I'm going to put in 2 or 3 wraps collecting that in. Now, I'm not pulling down super tight. I'm going to trim the Flashabou maybe about a ½ an inch or so past the back here. I don't want to pull in super tight because I don't want to cut that foam. This is where we're going to finish off by putting in some rubber legs. You can use whatever you want. I'm using some Chartreuse and blue flaked Sili Legs or silicone legs. I'm going to cut 2 of them full length. And then I'm going to double those over, and I'm going to cut those in half. It'll take 2 of them, tie them on my side. I like to tie these with the legs longer in the back and shorter up in the front, but you could do them right down the middle if you want. I'm going to tie these in, and I'm just going to pull in just a little bit. I don't want to crank on that and have it all folded in on the side. Take the other 2 legs and do the same thing. All you have are round rubber legs. That's good enough. So I'm going to put in 3 wraps right there. Now you could whip finish right there if you want to. I don't like to, because what it does, the thread wraps pinch more and more in there, and your legs basically, instead of splaying out just a little bit, they become wedged in there and they just stick perpendicular out to the foam body. So I'm going to sweep these back, bring my thread from underneath up behind the eye of the hook, and I'm just going to make a little head to finish that off. Do a whip finish. Don't want to crowd the eye. I'm just going to put in about a 4 or 5 turn whip finish. Tighten that down. and then a little more head cement. Put some head cement back here, around on the thread wraps, the exposed thread wraps under here, and even in here. Not going to hurt this fly by putting a little bit of extra head cement on it. So as I said, the Kent Stealth Bomber is a great little slider pattern. I do notice that often, especially after it's fished, this foam will start to get kind of flat. It also pushes the tail down in a downward direction. I think it fishes just as well. I've had some of these that I've fished in the course of the summertime, and they've gotten all chewed up, hardly have any legs on them, and this foam is all chewed up, and this is flat as a pancake. They still fish great. So even when, I mean, the slider head on this is going to have a nice, dip and chug and disturbance to it. So even when the bubbles and stuff aren't necessarily working in the back, it still fishes really, really well. So like I said, one of my go-to slider topwater flies for bass, even panfish. Check out those links in the description down below, because the website articles have some information about variations on this, different colors and things that are very effective, and different ways to fish the Kent Stealth Bomber. I normally fish this with a loop knot on the front. It just gives it a little bit more freedom to move around and not be affected by the tippet. So there's Kent Stealth Bomber. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.